Good afternoon. My name is Mike Anders. I've been a good friend of the Farmer family for a while. As he said, my family probably knows them much better than I do because I have been gone a lot. I joined the Army when I was 18 years old, and I've been doing it ever since. I've been in the Army for just about 30 years now. And in those 30 years, I've been able to travel all around the world to see a lot of different things and a lot of different people. But today, we're here to talk about Veterans Day. And I'm very happy to be here to do this. Dr. Farmer, thank you for inviting me. This is truly a privilege. But today I'd like to share with you a little bit about the history of Veterans Day, why we celebrate it, and introduce you to the different generations that we have in our country that have fought in many wars. There we go. I've got it now. Thank you. So what is Veterans Day? So Veterans Day was originally established in 1919. It was the first anniversary of the end of World War I. It was actually the day to celebrate the day that the fighting stopped after World War I. On November 11th, 1918, at 11 o'clock in the morning, the Allies and Germany came to an agreement to stop fighting, and that was the beginning of the end of the war. And what you see on the slide here is on the right. That is a picture of downtown Pittsburgh. In the weeks that followed November 11th, 1918, celebrations like this occurred all across the country. People packed the streets, flags were flying, and emotions were high because they were so happy that the long war had been over. It was known as the Great War, and hopefully the last war. The newspaper you see here is a Pittsburgh paper. You can see that they were celebrating that the armistice, which is an agreement to stop fighting, was established on November 11th. On the paper it says 6 a.m. in the morning. That's actually Pittsburgh time. In France, when the fighting stopped, it was 11 o'clock, which is why we celebrate on the 11th hour of the 11th month, or the 11th day of the 11th month. So in 1926, Congress established an annual holiday for Armistice Day. And then in 1938, it became a national holiday. And then in 1954, following World War II and the Korea War, it was turned into Veterans Day, which is what we celebrate today. But who are our veterans? So we have about 18 million veterans in the country today. And this covers veterans from World War II all the way up to the conflict that we fight today. You can see that we have veterans that fought in Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf War, and Afghanistan and Iraq. However, not all veterans have fought in wars. There were many that just stayed in the United States or served in places where there were no conflict. But regardless of where they served, they all served our country. So Veterans Day is a day set aside to pay tribute to the patriotism, service, and sacrifice that our men and women in uniform have sacrificed in their time. This group of people demonstrates the willingness to fight and risk their lives for the freedoms that we all enjoy. Their service inspires our future generations, my generation, your generation, to defend those same freedoms for their children. In the 16 million veterans or Americans that fought in World War II, we only have about 389,000 left across the nation. About 20,000 of those live here in the state of Pennsylvania. They are dying at a rate of 294 per day. So I recommend, if you ever get the opportunity to talk with someone who served in World War II, maybe your great-grandfather, or maybe someone you might see at a restaurant, they're easily identifiable in most cases because they like to wear the hat that you see in the picture, the World War II veteran hat. This is a hat that you'll see worn by many veterans, especially on holidays like today, so they can be easily recognized. So if you see someone wearing a World War II veteran hat, I would recommend you go and thank them for their service. It is men and women like these people that have created the world in which we live now, a world free of some of the tyranny that threatened us back in World War II. We also have a generation of veterans that fought in the Korean War. Not long after the end of World War II, the United States entered the Korean War in 1950, alongside our democratic allies in South Korea against the communist regime of North Korea. The scope of this war did not require the sacrifice that World War II required of our American society. And as a result, many Americans here in the United States just kind of went about their daily lives while the war was fought half a world away. Much like maybe the wars that we fight today. You know, we have soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're over there fighting for the freedoms that we enjoy. However, many people in the United States sometimes forget that we are still at war. Of the 5.7 million Americans that served during this war, there are approximately a little over 2 million Korean War veterans alive today. This generation of veterans will be the age of your great-grandparents. The Vietnam War is also another generation of veterans that we have in the United States. The Vietnam War was very unpopular here at home. Protests were held throughout the country, and soldiers were unjustly portrayed as murderers and baby killers. When they returned home from war, they were treated very poorly. Many were cursed at, they were spat upon, and they were looked down upon by society. This was a much different experience than what the World War II veterans and sometimes the Korean War veterans experienced when they returned home. They returned home to parades and to well wishes and to different ways that we supported them, but not the Vietnam War veterans. They were the ones that were treated very poorly, all because of our attitudes toward the war. If you are ever fortunate enough to meet someone that served in the Vietnam War, again, you can probably identify them by the type of hat that they wear. I would recommend that you just go up there and tell them simply, welcome home. Thank you for your service. I'll guarantee you that if you do that, that'll be one of the few times that a Vietnam veteran will have heard welcome home, because they were not welcomed home when they returned back in the 1970s and the 1960s. The Gulf War veterans are about your parents' age. This was a war that happened in 1991. While approximately 2.3 million Americans served in the Gulf War, only about 694,000 actually deployed and fought against Iraq in Operation Desert Storm. The ground campaign of the Gulf War was so effective that it only lasted about 100 hours, which is why this war has the name the 100-Hour War. Operation Desert Storm was an overwhelming victory for the United States, and our military were treated as heroes when they returned. There were parades, much like what you saw or might have seen in World War II pictures, of our soldiers marching in formation with the vehicles and streamers and banners and flags, and everyone celebrating the tremendous victory that we had. Much different than what Vietnam experienced. While these conflicts may not always have been popular, they found ways to celebrate our soldiers. Iraq and Afghanistan are still being fought today. There are an estimated 3.5 million servicemen and women who have served in our military since September 11th, 2001. A majority of those have deployed multiple times to Iraq and Afghanistan. The number of Iraq and war veterans continue to grow as we continue to fight, and we've been fighting for the last 18 years. The veterans range in age from the mid-20s to the late 40s, sometimes into their 50s. Many veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan were also serving during Desert Storm. While these conflicts have not always been popular with American people, who sometimes forget that we are still at war, it seems that our society has learned from our past. For the most part, We have shown the ability to separate how we feel about our wars that we're engaged in from our ability to support our soldiers and troops. So while our veterans have sacrificed in the service of our nation, it's important to remember that our families have also served and sacrificed. This is a picture of my family. I get a chance to brag about them a little bit. So this was taken at my promotion ceremony back in March. My wife Elaine is in the red, and those are our 5 children. Oldest is Daniel, and then Caitlin, Madison, Zachary, and Haley. We have 5 children. But the reason why I wanted to show you this slide is because I want to talk a little bit about military families. I think we are a typical military family. Now, I've been in the Army about 30 years, and we are now living in the 16th home as a family. We have moved 16 times over the course of 30 years. Our youngest are Zachary and Haley. They're twins. They're 15 years old. They are in the 10th grade in high school. This is the 9th school they've attended in 10 years of education. They've had to move schools almost every year. And when we leave Pennsylvania next year, they will go to their 11th school, or correction, their 10th school in 11 years. We're hoping that when we go to our next assignment, they will actually get to stay in the same school for 2 years in a row. My oldest son is Daniel. He's the one in uniform on the far left. He is currently in the Army, serving in the Middle East, in Kuwait. He actually comes home next week. So this has been a new development with military families. This is becoming a family business. So while my dad served in the Navy, I was not born whenever he was in the Navy, but in many cases, the children of service members tend to join the service themselves. We don't have many, or a very small percentage of our men and women in uniform that have actually come from homes in which nobody has served, which is creating a bit of a divide between society and our armed forces. We tend to kind of get drawn away from each other because we're not near each other. We don't get the chance to get to know each other as well. Military families tend to stay in the military. Civilian families tend to stay in the civilian world. Very, very few times do we get a chance to engage like we are today. And I hope that I get a chance to meet and talk with more of you throughout the day. But military families are tough and resilient. We've traveled about 6 times cross country. I've had to load up my van more times than I can count with suitcases and duffel bags and trailers to haul our kids from Washington State to here to Pennsylvania. We lived in Hawaii. We've lived down in Georgia. We've had to move many times in many different places. Also, the twins, the youngest, I was telling Dr. Farmer earlier, I was not there when they were born. They were born in 2004, and I was on my first deployment to Afghanistan. So about 2 months, maybe 6 weeks after I deployed, they were born. My wife was in Hawaii, and she had the help of my mother. And so she had 2 newborn babies, and then 3 toddlers, really 9, 5, and 7, to handle on her own for a year while I was gone. So the strength of the military family is amazing. They are resilient and they are tough. And without the support of the family, I could not do the job that I do as a soldier. So military families also serve and they also sacrifice. In addition to the military service, our veterans continue to make a difference in our country and make a better place in our communities. A lot of our veterans serve in federal, state, and local governments. However, many of our veterans simply work and live in our communities. They very rarely want to be seen, or not want to be seen. They are very rarely seen. They would rather just go about their day. But I tell you, the work ethic and the values that our veterans bring to our communities are valuable. You may not know, but we have a few veterans that work here for WPSD. We have Mr. Barnett. security officer. Sir, would you please stand? Mr. Barnett was in the United States Army. We were talking earlier. He was an infantryman. He joined in 1982, I think you told me. And then he got out and we went to the reserves. Then he went back into the Army again later in 1997 up until 2001. He served as an infantryman and also as a field artilleryman. Two very tough jobs. Sir, thank you for your service. I want to encourage you that as you, thank you. There are also others here at the school. Mr. Nick Posey, who's not here with us today. He was a sergeant, served 5 years in the Marine Corps and 7 years in the Army National Guard. Also, we had Mr. Ed Tissue, who served as a corporal in the Marine Corps from 2003 to 2007. And he deployed twice to Iraq. So I would encourage you, as you see these gentlemen on campus, talk to them about their experiences, listen to their stories, and then most of all, thank them for their service. So again, thank you very much for having me here today. It is a pleasure to be here and explain to you a little bit about what Veterans Day is and what it means. It is something that I hold true to and dear to my heart as a soldier, and I pray that our veterans will, as they look back on their experiences, they'll share it with those that maybe don't know anything about it. So Dr. Farmer, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, like I said, as soldiers, we can't do what we do without the support of our families and without the support of our loved ones and our friends. I consider Dr. Farmer a true friend. And the support that you've given us as a military family has been important. And not only you, but also others that we know. So I'd like to present you with a coin just as a token of appreciation. It's a coin that is presented by an American soldier in appreciation for your prayers and your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for your service. Everyone who has served in the military is instantly a hero of mine. Thank you for all you do for us. In a few moments, we're going to be walking through the hall.